Welcome to chapter 3 of the book of Micah. We will go through the chapter first a little bit in the Greek and then in English. It begins, Ke eri akusate thee, e hare tu Yaakov, ke katalapi iku Israel, uk imin esti tu genone tokrima. And he shall say, now who is the he? Well, we ended up, the Lord shall lead them, and then it continues, and he shall say, here indeed, O Arche, the archaeologist, Arche is a head, chief, beginning of that word, something that begins something. Here indeed, the heads of Jacob, and O remnants of the house of Israel. So apparently, this was written by Micah after Israel was taken, and now Micah's down in the southern kingdom of Judah, which apparently falls under Jacob, and the remnants of the house of Israel who are still left of the northern kingdom after having been taken by the Assyrians, King Sennacherib. And it continues, is it or it is not to you to know equity? And whenever you see the uk is not, esti can go kind of almost either way. It is not to you to know equity. O one's detesting the good things and seeking the wicked things. So if we are doing evil things, seeking the wicked things, then knowing equity of God is not going to be the same as if we were doing the good things and following what he had to say. And they were seizing by force their skins from them, the clothing or coverings of their habitations, and their flesh from their bones, making them slaves almost, in which manner they devoured the flesh of my people, and their skins they flayed from them, and the bones they fractured in pieces, as flesh for the kettle, and as meats for the pot. Thus they shall cry out to the Lord, and he will not listen to them, the ones that are doing these bad things, taking advantage of the poor people and stealing things of theirs and putting them into slavery. He will not listen to them. That's a sad place to be when God will not listen to you. And we can take note of this if we're doing the evil things, maybe not to expect the Lord to listen when we need him. We have Jesus Christ, who is God incarnate in the earth, and he does listen to us even in our sin when we go into a repentance of our actions. And he shall turn his face from them in that time, because they were wicked in their practices. And so that's a sad place. Thus says the Lord over the prophets, misleading my people, the ones bringing by their teeth and proclaiming a peace upon them, and it was not put to their mouth. They even sanctified a war against them. These apparently clergy of the northern kingdom were not doing things that were right, and the clergy was telling the people things that weren't true, that supposedly from God, but it wasn't from God. It sort of reminds me of the peace and prosperity preachers of our time who say that if you send them money, then you'll have a peaceful life and you'll be rewarded in abundance by what you give to them. Sort of the same thing as it was happening back in those days. If God didn't put it into a prophet's mouth, and he's saying things that are not of God, woe to him. You're going to be standing in front of God someday and answering to him. That prophet will. On account of this, there shall be night to you from out of vision, and darkness will be found to you from out of divination. Now, this word orasios appears many times in the Old Testament, but only 4 times in the New Testament, and one of them is in Acts 2:13, where it says, "And it will be in the last days," which is a quote of the Old Testament, says God, "I will pour out from my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." This was quoted by Peter at Pentecost to the people that came and thought all the people there that were speaking in languages were drunk, but not so. So on account of this, a night will be to you until the time of Christ, and darkness will be to you from divination. This only appears in the Old Testament. Whenever you see the decimal point in there, that's only an Old Testament word. The other ones can be either old and new, or just the new for sure. "And the sun shall go down upon the prophets, and the day shall darken upon them." Now, the prophets, many places in the Old Testament, we have all the writings of the prophets, of which Micah was one. And starting with, there are a lot of prophets in Samuel, and ones that didn't write books, but the ones that wrote a book, Isaiah and Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, on and on. And so a prophet was mentioned that was going to come. And that prophet is Jesus, as we will see. It says in Matthew 14:5, "And wanting to kill him," that is Herod the king, "he feared the multitude, for they held him as a prophet." And then in Luke 1:76, it was said, "And you, child, shall be called prophet of highest." And in the Old Testament, there was the prophet, which it was talking about, who is Jesus. In Acts 3:23, it says, "And it shall be every soul whichever should not hearken to that prophet shall be utterly destroyed from the people." A certain prophet. The other main prophet in this time was John the Baptist, John the Immerser. And it mentions that in Matthew 11:9 by Jesus, who says about John, "A prophet? Yes, I say to you, and more extra of a prophet." And then in Matthew 11:13 later, he says, "For all the prophets and the law prophesied unto John." So in the Old Testament, apparently, the prophets ceased. We don't hear of prophets in Israel. I have not heard of any prophets in Israel. The prophecies of the Old Testament stopped apparently at the time of John, but yet with the church, it didn't stop. And it says in Acts 11:27, "And in these days came down from Jerusalem unto Antioch, prophets unto Antioch." And then in Acts 13:1, "And there were some in Antioch, according to the assembly being there, prophets and teachers," and it gives their names. You can look them up in Acts 13:1. So apparently the prophets now began after the time of Jesus. It says in Acts 15:32, "And Judas and Silas also themselves being prophets. So now we know two of them, their names, and the other one's in the quotation before. In Acts 21:10, it says, "And of our many days remaining, there came down a certain one from Judea, a prophet by name of Agabus." So now another prophet. In 1 Corinthians 12:28, it says, "And whom indeed God appointed in the assembly, first apostles, second prophets." And that's also mentions that in Ephesians 4:11. So in the church will be, or the assembly, and not a church. I keep saying church, I'm used to it, but the assembly, there will be prophets. And it even tells the behavior that needs to happen when these prophets speak. It says in 1 Corinthians 14:29, "And prophets, let 2 or 3 speak, and the others scrutinize." And then in 1 Corinthians 14:32, it says, "For spirits of prophets submit to prophets." Now later, in the future to us, it says in the book of Revelation 11, verse 10, "For these 2 prophets tormented the ones dwelling upon the earth." So these 2 specific prophets will be in the holy city. And then in Revelation 16:6, it says, "For the blood of holy ones and prophets they poured out." And that would have been after or during the tribulation period. In Revelation 22:9, the writer of, or the angel appears to John, the writer of the book of Revelation, says, "For I am your fellow servant and of your brothers of the prophets." And this is why I believe that John is not the same as a brother of James, but is a different person. He's called a prophet, where John was an apostle. In the Old Testament, many prophets, but we do have one that was like the Pharisees. The Pharisees at the time of Jesus, he says, "So that you witness against yourselves, that you are sons of the ones murdering the prophets." And he condemns the Pharisees at the time. And it mentions Balaam being a prophet, and he was not a Jew. Balaam came to King Balak, went on his donkey, and it talked to him. Number 4395 is prophecy. We're not into that word here in this chapter of Micah, but it appears 146 times. And prophesying, do you have to be a prophet to prophesy? That's a good question, but we're not going to answer that because that's a question I'm asking myself. And it continues in verse 7, "And the ones seeing the dreams shall be disgraced, and the clairvoyants shall be ridiculed, and all these shall speak ill against them, for there is not one heeding them." So all the prophecies were null and void. "Surely I shall fill up strength by Spirit of the Lord, and judgment and might, to report to Jacob of his impiety, and to Israel of his sins." And so God is going to condemn them. "Hear indeed these things, the leaders of the house of Jacob, and the remnants of the house of Israel, the ones abhorring equity, and all the ones perverting straight ways, the ones building Zion by blood, and Jerusalem by injustice." Now, who could he be referring to today? Who fits this bill that's filling Jerusalem with injustice and Zion with blood? In verse 11, it continues, "Her leaders judge with bribes." And today in Israel, we have a judicial upheaval that hundreds of thousands of people are protesting over the judiciary. I'm not exactly sure what's all going on there, but then they had judges taking bribes, and her priests answer with a wage. And we've seen that with Eli's sons who were taking the good meat that was supposed to be sacrificed and burned and taking it for themselves, forcing people to do that. And her prophets are dividing with silver. So somebody will prophesy something good over you if you give them money. And so this is what was happening, sort of like I mentioned the health and wealth teachers. But upon the Lord they rest upon, they're saying, oh, is not the Lord among us? It's like these health and wealth. I mean, they're pretending God is telling them to do this. So it's like, isn't he with us? Give me your money. In no way shall bad things come upon us. Give me your money. On account of this, because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem will be as a vacant storehouse of fruits. Now, what's going to happen to the people that are being taught by these health and wealth teachers today? What's going to happen to a country that allows them to do that? Well, we'll find out, I guess, won't we? And the mountain, the house as a place, become as a house, as a place of a forest. And so the desolation of Israel was talking about a portent, I believe, of the future for Israel. And the portent that Micah was showing to these people that was going to happen would happen at the time of Jesus, when they were all taken. Actually, before that, even with Nebuchadnezzar, he came and took all the people of Judea and Jerusalem, and then later the Romans. So a portent of the future. The next chapter, we're going back into the last of the days, the eschatological part of Micah. We've went through this a lot in the past, but we're going to go through it a little bit more, and I hope you join us to go through it in the next video seminar. Until then, God bless.